I built a cooler for a guy in Hatch, New Mexico, and then they were all cotton farmers. They didn't know anything about lettuce, so I took this Japanese guy, old Clarence Yoshida, down, and we planted 200-300 acres of lettuce. One day he'd be on the tractor and I'd be on the planter, and the next day, well, I'd be on the, we swapped back and forth. We planted all that lettuce, but anyway, I went down to, I had a little, what kind of truck? I had a little Studebaker truck, 1.5 tons. And I went down to get that lettuce planter, and I stopped by the airport in Truth of Conscience to fuel up. And some old Tex was there, and I looked out there, and there was a tripacer, almost new, but it was upside down. And I was looking at it, and I came back and told Tex, I'd give $1,000 for that. He said, you can buy it for less than that. And I said, how do you know? He said, well, there's an outfit in El Paso, TBL Adjusters, and they're the people who are going to handle it. So I went home, and he gave me their number, and I called him up, and I told him I'd give so much for it. And then the next day I called him, and I said, I know what they're going to do. He's got all his buddies around. He's going to tell me. They told me they couldn't sell it to me. They had to have 3 bids. Well, I said, now that he's got a bid from me, he's going to go tell his buddies what I bid, and they'll up it a little bit and get it. So I called him the next day and says, hey, I'm not trying to hustle, but I'm leaving town, and I upped it like $150. I offered them $730, and they took it. And I went down with a little pickup that only had a 6-foot bed, and I loaded that airplane in the back of that pickup. And it was a Sunday morning, and I was digging the wings off it, and all those Sunday guys came around telling me I couldn't load it in that pickup, but nobody helped me. I was on my own. And I remember when I got it loaded, I started up to Truth or Consequences, from Truth or Consequences to Socorro, and it was in the springtime, and I had the wings on each side, and I thought, oh, I thought I was going to turn over. I thought, there she goes. It heeled way over, and I finally got to Socorro, and I turned right to go up the hill, and it started to snow, the biggest darn snow. It was dark by then. It was a big old snowflake, and my lights were up in the air because I had that airplane in the back. I couldn't see the road, but some Ford panel passed me with great big taillights, and I followed him up to the top of the hill, and I got a screwdriver and lowered the light so I could see the road, and I got into Deming and stayed all night, and they told me about all the house, what do you call them, what do you call those houses, trailer house that turned over from the wind.
From the wind?
Anyway, the next day I kept saying, I'll just get to the next town, but I went all the back roads and got all the way to, I wish I'd taken a picture of that thing.
Was that on the International? You had that on the old International?
I had it on that International pickup.
I can't believe that. You had a plane?
I wish I had taken a picture of it. I tried to get somebody to go with me, and nobody wanted to go, but lucky they didn't, because I had the landing gear in the front seat with me. Anyway, that tripacer that was upside down, Jim rebuilt it, and we flew it for a year or so, and Tim was president of the Aero Club down in Texas, and they had several tripacers, and they had one Mooney with retractable gear, and they'd bellied it in a time or two, and it was about to break them. And Jim told him, if you don't get rid of that, it's going to break you guys. So we traded him our tripacer and gave him a little money and got the Mooney, and we flew that for a couple of years. And then there was a fella here that used to, what was his name, his wife, we played duplicate bridge with him. And Norm Affleck's buddy, and he went to work. Anyway, he was a drug peddler, but he, really not dope.
Right.
He worked for
pharmaceuticals.
Pharmaceuticals, yeah. But he turned into an airplane salesman in Denver, and he called me up one time and told me that somebody traded in this Cherry Comanche, and we'd ought to trade the Mooney for it, which we did. And I told Jim, and Jim was coming from Washington with a guy by the name of Don Brown, so they went to Denver and picked it up and flew it down here. And no, I think I flew it down here. And then they came, yeah, I did with Norm Affleck. I flew it down here. But then we just had it a little bit and we flew it back all night. Jim came elk hunting and he was about to go back. I said, you know, there's some weather coming in. If we don't leave, we're not going to get out of here. So we left about 5 o'clock and we were just going to go someplace in Kansas, Topeka, I think. And anyway, there wasn't anything there, and so we said, well, we'll go to Indianapolis, and there was nobody there, so we went all the way to Washington. The sun was coming up. We flew all night. So we still have that Comanche.
That's the one you still have?
We gave $12,000 for it. And it's still worth 40 or 50. And it's 50-some years, been in the family a long time. And it's a good cross-country airplane.
Was the Mooney as fast as the Comanche?
The Mooney was the only airplane. It had 150 horsepower and it would do 150 miles an hour.
Very efficient.
Very efficient, and it only burned about 8 gallons an hour. The Comanche burns about 12 or 13 gallons. It'll do about 170, but it's got 250 horsepower. But it'll haul 4 people, and it's a good cross-country airplane. When they were promoting that airplane, they had some old man by the name of Max Conrad, and he set all kinds of records trying to sell the airplane. But he flew it nonstop from Casablanca, North Africa to LA, nonstop.
A Comanche?
A Comanche.
It must have had a lot of extra fuel tanks on it.
Yeah, it was plumb full of fuel, tanks, he had them all over, and he got in the trade winds, and he flew from Casablanca over to the Virgin Islands or someplace in the Caribbean, and he stayed down on the deck too. I thought he'd go up, but there's about a 20-knot easterly breeze in those trade winds, so he picked up he had a little help. And then he was going to go to Houston originally, but he still had plenty of fuel, so he went on to LA and landed.
Why?